Hi everybody, this is Brooks Lindsay. I'm the founder and editor of a website called Debatepedia.org, where we essentially try to distill the major pro and con arguments and the editorials and the opinion pieces and the books and essays on whatever debate topics out there. We've been around for about 4 years, since 2006, and today I want to walk you through an article that we have on what's called graduated response or three strikes policy, which is in relation to piracy, and it's an effort to limit piracy while not being too draconian on consumers. Essentially, what graduated response is a typically three strikes policy in which two warnings would be issued to a pirating consumer, someone who's downloading files, music, or video illegally, typically on a file sharing service. Two warnings are issued initially, followed by a penalty, such as cutting off internet access entirely, pretty severe form, or limiting internet access, another proposal, or potentially a fee or a fine or something. So I want to go through some of the pros and cons. This has been, by the way, implemented now into law in France and in the United Kingdom. People thought it was going to be part of the anti-counterfeiting trade agreement that had been negotiated from 2008 to 2010. Apparently, it's not going to be. It's just going to be an ad hoc, well, country by country kind of a policy. I think that's how it should be. So some of the pros and cons. Graduated response is the least draconian option. So the whole idea here is that prior to any graduated response proposals, litigation lawsuits were the primary means of stopping pirating. So the Recording Industry Association of America would see that someone was violating copyright laws, their copyrights over music, and they would launch a lawsuit over them to basically make a case of them and deter other people from downloading more music. And this would be extremely costly for the people that were being sued. Uh, Typically, they were just ordinary consumers who weren't really thinking much about it. And so graduated response is intended to be much less draconian than that for the people that are actually getting punished. So instead of a major lawsuit that could be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, it is just a cutting off of internet access. But even before then, you get two warnings, and then if you don't stop, you get cutting off internet access or some kind of punishment. So much more reasonable, soft approach, I think. A lot of people disagree with the idea, saying that it is a draconian policy, particularly when you're talking about cutting off people's internet access for just downloading files illegally. Cutting off internet access can be, for some people, very devastating. It can mean that maybe their whole household loses internet access. Their kids can't do their homework. They can't do their work. They can't buy certain goods online. They can't interact with people, friends, and family. So it can be pretty devastating, especially in a modern digitalized world. So that's one argument for it being fairly draconian. I would say, though, that graduate response policies can be tailored to be less draconian than just fully cutting off internet access. In France, it is draconian. It is cutting off internet access after the third strike. But it could be something less severe. Fine, limiting internet access, and so forth. So it can be made very soft if we really want to, if we determine that that's important. So that's one back and forth. I would also say that uh, on the con side, there is the risk that people will be falsely accused. So this is part of a number of different factors, but essentially it's very difficult for internet service providers to determine exactly who was the offending person. So they, of course, know maybe it was somebody's computer that was used, but they don't know the specific person that was behind the computer. So you might end up having a situation where a friend comes over to a house, uses a Wi-Fi spot to download music legally, and then that household is held accountable for that friend that came over and so forth. So you have this kind of gray area where accusations from the copyright holders, like the Recording Industry Association of America, could be inaccurate against people that are downloading music illegally, or maybe they're not, and they're being falsely accused. And so one proposal is to include a judicial process in here to make sure there's due process, so that it wouldn't just be, let's say, a voluntary relationship between the copyright holders like AT&T and Comcast and the internet service providers, the ISPs, uh, or I'm sorry, between the copyright holders. So that would be, you know, the Recording Industry Association, and then the ISPs, Comcast, etc. Uh, that it should actually be including the government, that it's mandated, and in addition that there's a judicial process to make sure there's due process. I think that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of efficacy, graduated response warnings, they seem to be very effective. So there is a fact here that for the very first warning, this was a study that was done. I'll just read the whole thing. Susan Butler, a veteran music industry reporter who now manages the publication Music Confidential, reporting on a trial of how graduate response affects user behavior. Quote, the trial revealed that the vast majority of subscribers stopped the activity after receiving notices, says Saccone. With each subsequent notice, another 50% stopped the activity. Only a relative handful of subscribers continued the activity after receiving notices. These results support the conclusion that a notice program can have a very big impact on piracy. These results were consistent with the studies in other countries as well. So the hope is that just warning people, either the first time or the second time, will stop them before there's any cutting off of internet access, before there's any limiting the internet access, before there's any fear, any form of punishment at all. And typically, if you have a sufficient form of punishment, you're going to definitely, with that warning, let them know and probably deter them from continuing to pirate material. So again, it's a soft and gradual approach that tries to warn users before actually punishing them. And I think that's reasonable public policy. Now, let's see. One thing that people say is that a graduated response could shut down public internet hubs. So this is, quote, this is an article, Three Strikes for the Web, the Los Angeles Times editorial, April 13, 2010. One danger, quote, is that the duties and liabilities they impose could prompt those who provide internet access in public spaces, coffee shops, libraries, universities, and the like, to stop or limit their services to avoid any risk of even innocent infringement. That would be a step backward for Britain's efforts to promote ubiquitous broadband. Now, again, it's an interesting point. Essentially, how can you target the right people and make sure there's not a chilling effect out there? I think that the truth is that this can be tailored properly, so that, let's say, a public setting like a library, there could be very easy restrictions on the use of certain illegal file sharing websites while in the public library. And if someone wants to use those file sharing websites, hey, they can go and use them at home or whatever, connect on a private Wi-Fi network. But in certain public Wi-Fi, environments, you can't have that kind of, hold on, you can't have that kind of access to those file sharing sites. So anyway, I'm going to stop here for now. I think this was a decent video. I probably could have done a better job, but I hope you guys get something out of it. And make sure to make comments or go on to debatepedia.org, research more. The article is Graduate Response Anti-Piracy Laws on debatepedia.org. Anyway, take care. Have a good day.